Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back, or if it's your first time here, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking all about the Kylie Cosmetics Kyshadow palette. This is the bronze palette. It is her first eyeshadow palette that she's released in her collection. So I got my hands on this because obviously I was very intrigued. So I'm quickly going to tell you guys my thoughts on the palette, but really the core of this video and the whole purpose of this video is to give you guys dupes for this palette. I decided that I wanted to dupe this whole entire palette because since this palette is so difficult to actually get, I wanted to show you guys that you could basically create your own Kylie eyeshadow palette with other eyeshadows from other companies. Now, dupes could mean many different things. So for this video, I'm really just talking about color dupes. So colors that are basically identical to the colors that are in this palette. So I really hope you guys enjoy this video. Do not forget to let me know what you think in the comments. Have you tried the Kylie eyeshadow palette? I would love to know your thoughts if you have. Do not forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it and would like to see more. And of course, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And without further ado, let's get into the video. So before I actually get into the dupes, let me just quickly talk about the palette itself because I'm sure you guys are wondering what I actually think of it. So to break it down really simply, I don't love this palette. I don't hate this palette. I am able to blend out the colors. The pigmentation is just fine. As for the colors in this palette, I think the colors are beautiful. I think it's a great neutral palette. It is really nice for every day. I personally have found myself really reaching for it a ton just because it really has everything that I need. So I think the colors in general are really beautiful. However, are they totally unique and you can't find anywhere else? Well, clearly not, considering I found dupes for every single shade in here. When I went to Sephora to get dupes for this palette for this video, I ran into so many girls who were freaking out that I had this palette in my hand. They were like, oh my God, is that the Kylie palette? Can I see it? Can I see it? And I just found it so funny that people were just freaking out over this thing when it is like the most basic palette. I just find it very funny how everybody really freaks out about it because of the name that's attached to it. So those are my 2 cents. Take it for what you will. Now let's move on to the actual dupes. Okay, so the first shade in the palette is a matte cream. This is a very basic shade. There are plenty of matte creams out on the market. I found this one to be a pretty neutral matte cream, which I did really like. I think it works really beautifully as a brow highlight shade or inner corner highlight shade. It's very nicely pigmented, so you get a lot of pop to it. So the closest dupe that I was able to find for this specific shade, which is by the way called Jasper, is Blanc Type from MAC. This is basically the exact same undertone, the same creaminess, the same texture. Now another very similar eyeshadow is Fresh from Anastasia Beverly Hills. This one I feel like is just a little bit off in its undertone, but honestly, a matte cream shade is a matte cream shade. Once it's actually on the skin, you really can't tell much of a difference. I think it is definitely close enough to consider it a dupe. All right, so now moving on to the second shade in the palette, which is called Quartz, and this is a really pretty soft champagne shade, really beautiful to put on the inner corner or all over the lid. It really does open up and brighten up the eyes. However, this is another shade that I found a ton of dupes for, and I'm sure there are even more on the market. Now, the first one that I have over here, which I would consider to be an exact dupe, is All That Glitters from MAC. This has the same type of texture, same beautiful sheen to it, and it has the same undertone. Now, the next shade that I would say is probably a 90% dupe is SATEEN from Anastasia. Quartz in the Kylie palette leans a little bit like a touch more pink when you compare it to SATEEN. You can really see the differences. Another Anastasia eyeshadow that is 100% dupe, I would say, is called GLEAM. This one has the exact same undertone, the exact same texture. It is definitely 100% a dupe. Now, to basically give you guys just more options from different companies, this is a Pro Shadow from OFRA. I do not have the name right over here, but I will put it on the screen as well as in the description box down below. This one is an exact dupe for this color. Even when you compare it side by side to GLEAM, it looks exactly the same. Like I said, I just want to give you guys some options from different companies. All right, so that is it for Quartz. Now let's move on to Topaz, which is the neutral matte brown that's in this palette. Now, I actually found it a little bit more difficult to find dupes for this specific shade because for brown specifically, I feel like when there's a very small tonal difference in the color, you could definitely really tell, but I think I got some pretty close ones here. So the first one that I have over here is called FAWN from Anastasia. This is a very, very similar color. I would say that FAWN is just slightly warmer. This is called Espresso, and this is basically the same tone, but it is slightly deeper than Topaz. So it's not exactly the same color, but I figured I would still mention it because if you have a deeper skin tone and you feel like Topaz just wouldn't work for you, then Espresso for MAC is definitely a really great option. Now, another eyeshadow that I would say is a 90% dupe is this Makeup Forever eyeshadow in the shade M636. Very, very similar. I would say it's maybe just like 1% warmer. However, I just wanted to say that I absolutely love the Makeup Forever eyeshadows. They are the most creamy, blendable, amazing eyeshadows. Probably some of the best on the market, to be honest with you. They blow the Kylie eyeshadows out of the water. They, however, are just a little bit more on the pricier side, but I'd still want to mention it just in case you were perhaps interested in a Makeup Forever eyeshadow. And also the pan size is huge. Now, the last shade that I have over here for Topaz, which I probably think is the closest shade that I was able to find, is a Buxom shadow, and this is in the shade Star Treatment. I think Buxom eyeshadows are really fantastic eyeshadows. I definitely do highly recommend them. I've spoken about them in my underrated products video. I think they are really great and definitely more people need to be using them. And this is definitely the closest dupe that I was able to find for Topaz. And once again, this is called Star Treatment. So moving on to the second row, let's talk about Goldstone, which is this bronzy shade over here. So I would say that one of the closest shades that I was able to find for this specific shade is MAC Woodwinked. This is very, very similar. It's that same really beautiful bronzy shade that just looks so beautiful all across the lid. Now, the next shade is another OFRA Cosmetics eyeshadow. Again, I do not have the name because it is not on the back of the eyeshadow, but I will put it right over here for your reference, as well as in the description box down below. This one is very similar to the color in the palette. However, this one has a little bit more of a goldier undertone. So if you are the type of person who likes bronzes that are a little bit more gold, then you may even prefer a color like this compared to the color that's in the palette. Just saying. Now, the last dupe that I found is ANASTASIA Topaz. I would say this is probably like a 99% dupe. When you look at them side by side, you can see there is like the slightest difference to them, but honestly, once again, on the eyes, you would not even be able to tell. So the last dupe that I have for you guys for Goldstone is the Sephora Collection Colorful Eyeshadow in the shade My Teddy Bear. Now, this one is definitely not an exact dupe, but again, I want to mention it because I want to mention as many brands as possible, and this one is similar. However, it is more on the lighter side. So it's really all about preference at that point. If you want something that's a little bit lighter, then this one is really gorgeous. And the Sephora Collection eyeshadows are really great and also totally underrated. So now let's move on to the shade in the middle of the second row, which is called Citrine. And I feel like this is probably the shade that most people are most excited about. It was very difficult to find a dupe for this one. I was only able to find one, but it is an exact dupe, and it is MAC Rule. So this is MAC Rule, and this is the same really gorgeous, warm, burnt orange shade that just looks amazing, especially when put in the crease. I also love applying colors like these right underneath my eyes. I feel like it really makes eyes pop. Moving on to the next shade called Tiger Eye. This is a stunning caramel brown shade. Shades like these are probably one of my favorites to use in the crease. It really does warm up the eye, and it's very easy to wear. So I definitely did find a few dupes for this one. I would say that an 100% dupe that I did find is ANASTASIA Caramel. It was the first shade that I thought of as soon as I saw this shade in the palette. I was like, this looks a lot like ANASTASIA Caramel, and I was right. Now, another basically identical shade is MAC Saddle. There's really not much to say about it other than it looks exactly like the eyeshadow in the palette. Another option for those of you who like this shade but would prefer something maybe a little bit lighter, you never know, want to give you guys the option, is ANASTASIA Burnt Orange Matte. So like I said, this is very similar in its tone, but it is slightly on the lighter side. Now, the last dupe that I have for you guys for this specific color is another Makeup Forever eyeshadow in M664. This is very, very similar. It is another very warm caramel matte brown, but it is slightly like the smallest bit lighter, but honestly on the eyes you could not even tell the difference. Okay, so now moving on to the third and last row, and this shade over here is called Hematite, and this is a mid-tone red base matte brown. So I definitely have quite a few shades over here that are very, very similar to this one. The first one that I have over here is ANASTASIA Sienna. This was another shade that I saw right away, and I said this looks exactly like ANASTASIA Sienna, and I was right. They're basically the exact same shade. Another very similar shade is ANASTASIA Morocco. I would just say that Morocco is maybe slightly lighter when you compare it to the eyeshadow that's in the Kylie palette. Now, this next shade I'm actually really excited to talk about because this was actually a YouTuber created. This is from the Ready Set Glamour, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the name for this brand. I believe it's called Itse. This is in the shade 15, and this is another very, very, very similar color. I would say that the only difference between this shade and the shade in the Kylie palette is that this one is a little bit more red. Lastly, we have MAC Brown Script, which is not an 100% dupe, but it is basically like 95% similar. I would say this one is just slightly deeper and slightly more red. Now let's move on to the middle shade of the last row, which is called Bronzite, and this is a very, very deep, very rich brown color. Other than this color in the center, the burnt orange color, this one was so difficult to dupe because, like I said, the tonal difference in browns really makes a huge difference in the overall look of the eyeshadow. So I was finding very deep, rich brown colors, but they would be a little bit too purple or a little bit too red or a little bit too cool. So the closest dupe that I was able to find for this shade is Smoke from ANASTASIA. I honestly did not find anything else that even came close. This one is definitely the closest that I was able to find. I would say the only difference is that Smoke is maybe a touch, like a hairpin cooler than the one in the palette. So then the last color in the palette is a matte black. I figured there was no point in me showing you dupes for a matte black because a matte black is a matte black. And I'm sure most of you have some sort of matte black in your collection, so I'm just going to skip on that one. So that basically completes all of the dupes for the Kylie eyeshadow palette. I really hope you guys find it helpful. And if you end up almost like recreating your own Kylie eyeshadow palette, send me a picture on Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram. I would love to see. I think it would be really, really cool to see actually. Do not forget to let me know what you thought in the comments. Are you going to be picking up a Kylie eyeshadow palette? Of course, give this video a big thumbs up, and of course, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And I love you guys so, so much, and I will see you next time. Bye. Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back. Or if it's your first time here, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of like a chit chat, get ready with